Marvel's Spider-Man, is one of the most controversial Magic the Gathering sets of this year, with concerns about lackluster art, references to modern foods, and just an overall deviation from what feels like Magic to a lot of players. But at the same time, many people are praising the cool top-down designs that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and deep dives into Marvel lore and seeing their favorite characters represented. All that said, the latest Universes Beyond inclusion has plenty of potential cards for Cube as long as you don't mind the cards standing out far more than Lord of the Rings or Final Fantasy. Hey everyone, welcome back to Masonzero MTG. In this video we're going to look at 10 cards for Cube from the Spider-Man set. I think there's actually a lot in this set that people are excited about, so I will probably miss plenty of cards that you are excited about if you want to put any of these in your cube. But these are 10 that I chose to talk about, so let's get into it. First we have Hobgoblin, Mantled Marauder. The red discard deck has been getting a lot of toys recently, and Hobgoblin joins up with Marauding Mako and Evora, as well as Inti and Voldaren Epicure even. On the surface, it may seem a downside that it gets +2/+0 instead of a permanent +1/+1 counter. But Hobgoblin trades Trample for both flying and haste, so between those abilities and the way the buff can add up, this card can be quite good with cards like Faithless Looting. Really, it reminds me a lot of Slick Shot Show Off. After all, with Hobgoblin and Faithless Looting, you can hit your opponent for 5 on turn 3 with ease. Urban Retreat and Oscorp Industries. Wow, do I love tapped tri-lands with upside. I currently run the Tarkir and Alara tri-lands in my cube since the fetchable new Capenna lands are pretty expensive. So I end up wanting to run some of the playtest tri-lands since they're pretty cool. I mean, just look at Omen Path to Naya. But for there to be real Magic cards like this is awesome. Urban Retreat is a Bant land that lets you pay 2 mana and return a tapped creature to your hand to put this land into play. That can be a weird sort of ramp, it can enable landfall, and it can enable enter the battlefield effects by replaying your creatures, and it's even in the right colors for those effects. Oscorp Industries is a Grixis land that you can play from your graveyard if you discarded it this turn, and if it enters from your graveyard you lose 2 life. That's just kind of madness with different words, but these colors feature plenty of discarding. I do kind of prefer the playtest card Maestro's Totally Safe Hideout, as sacrificing a creature to get a copy of the land is more in line with how Urban Retreat works, I feel like. While the Bant one does let you ramp, Oscorp would still have to be your land play for the turn, but it doesn't cost any mana to put it into play, so I guess they're reasonably balanced to each other. I wish there was a full cycle of these, and I can't wait to see more in the future, hopefully. Amazing Acrobatics. Cancel is certainly something these days. Amazing Acrobatics may look a lot like Urza's Rebuff, a card that is cool but didn't make waves. However, note one small difference. The words choose one versus the words choose one or both. If your opponent casts a spell in their first main phase, you'll be able to counter their spell and tap down up to 2 attackers. This card has a lot of potential and is being called the common version of Cryptic Command. Obviously that's a stretch, but the comparison is there for good reason. I think this is a good card to try out at medium levels as it might be too weak for high-powered cubes and too strong for weak cubes. It's a bit of a weird spot. Spider Manifestation. Oh, I get it now. Spider-Man Infestation. Good one. Anyways, this red-green mana dork has a hybrid mana cost, so it can be played in either a green or a red deck without the other color, and it's a 2-mana mana dork. But in addition to that, it also untaps whenever you cast any spell with mana value 4 or greater, so you can potentially use this card 2 or even 3 times in a turn. And it has reach for some reason, that's nice. The easy comparison here is probably Ruby Daring Tracker, which is also 2 mana, has haste so it can tap immediately, and can become a relevant attacker as the game goes on. But she does have to be played in a specifically red-green deck, whereas Spider Manifestation does not. Still definitely a medium power level card, but pretty good in the power 4 or greater archetype that is pretty easy to build these days. Heroes Hangout. In Final Fantasy, we got a new cube staple in Opera Love Song, a 2-mana instant speed modal spell that can cast spells off the top of your library or give a buff to your creatures. Heroes Hangout is more restrictive in pretty much every way, but it only costs 1 mana, and sometimes that can make all the difference. For starters, it is a sorcery instead of an instant, which might be a deal breaker for a lot of people. The first mode, much like Love Song, exiles the top 2 cards of your library. Hero's Hangout makes you only pick one of them, while Love Song lets you play both. However, Love Song only lets you play those cards until your next end step, whereas Hangout lets you play the chosen card until the end of your next turn. Functionally, this isn't drastically different, but it does offer some flexibility, assuming that you cast Love Song in your main phase. I guess technically, Hero's Hangout is a little bit less restrictive. The big downside here of Hangout is that you're always going to be telegraphing what you're going to play unless you flip over an instant. So this first ability has people calling this card a red sleight of hand, and while it's not quite as good in that regard, obviously red is not going to get that kind of card draw effect, so it's probably a decent comparison. The Exile mode is the exciting one, but each spell also has a buff effect. Love Song grants up to 2 creatures +2/+0, and Hangout grants up to 2 creatures +1/+0 and First Strike. I have always been a fan of Coordinated Assault, but giving First Strike at sorcery speed is just not as exciting as doing it at instant speed. Still, if you need to force damage through or make a creature survive an unfavorable combat, First Strike can still be quite powerful. I'm curious to see how people end up feeling about this card, and I actually expect that many people will run both Opera Love Song and Hero's Hangout. Spider-Woman, Stunning Savior. I've always thought that Imposing Sovereign was a good, clean design, and Authority of the Consuls and Thalia Heretic Cathar followed its footsteps with more powerful versions of the same effect. But I think that Spider-Woman might be a solid pick for this type of card in a lot of cases. For 2 mana, that being a hybrid white and blue, so you can play it in a mono white or a mono blue deck, you get a 2/2 with flying, and artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter tapped. I think for me, this is probably going to replace Thalia Heretic Cathar, but I also understand that most people might not want to do that. You see, I don't run fetch lands and shock lands in my cube, though maybe someday I will. So a lot of my lands actually enter tapped already, or are likely to, so Thalia affecting lands is actually not super relevant in my environment. But Spider-Woman affecting artifacts should come up more often. However, I think Thalia is still the right choice for people who are running very powerful cards and mana bases. Spider-Woman presents an opportunity to simplify or power down your cube in a way that I think a lot of people are looking for. Oh, and I didn't even mention she is a great addition to blue-white flyers, so that is definitely a plus side. Sandman, Shifting Scoundrel. Sandman is an awesome card for a lands theme, and particularly a lands in the graveyard theme. He's a 3-mana creature that can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and his power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. So he grows throughout the game and can't be chump blocked by little tokens. The most exciting ability though is that you can pay 5 mana to return him and a land from your graveyard to the battlefield. A self-recurring card is always nice to see, whether it's for ongoing value or as a repeating sacrifice target. With fetch lands, Kamigawa channel lands, cycling lands, and strip mine effects, most cubes should have no problem getting lands into the graveyard, and I think this card's only downside is that there are just too many other green 3-drops to consider for cube. Pictures of Spider-Man. Hey, remember Lead the Stampede? This is it now. That's kind of a joke, but it does actually have a similar effect. It's a 3-mana artifact that lets you dig 5 cards deep when it enters and put up to 2 creatures from among those 5 into your hand. You can also pay 1, tap, and sacrifice the artifact to create a treasure token. In most cases, this kind of feels like a downgrade to Lead the Stampede, but in cubes that care about certain mechanics, this is actually going to be a pretty good card. As an artifact with a sacrifice ability built in, this card can fuel Delirium. Being a permanent, it can also be flickered or sacrificed to other effects, which Lead the Stampede cannot. It can also be tapped for things like Improvise. You might find other minor upsides throughout your cube as well, such as it can discard to Thirst for Knowledge. That said, if you're not seeing any synergies in your own cube for this card, probably selection cards like Commune with Beavers and tutor cards like Worldly Tutor are often going to be more effective than this card will be. Rhino's Rampage. There are a ton of fight spells to choose from these days, including a lot of upgrades to good old Prey Upon. Rhino's Rampage is the latest 1-mana fight spell, and it has a lot going for it. First off, it's hybrid red-green, so you can play this in a red deck that doesn't have green in it, which is maybe one of the biggest upsides of it, because normally fight spells are in mono green and red gets some pretty crappy ones. So your creature gets +1/+0, then it fights a creature an opponent controls, and if it deals excess damage, you get to destroy a non-creature artifact with mana value 3 or less. Seems like a solid deal for just 1 mana, even if it is a sorcery. It's like a fight spell if it had a natural state tacked onto it sometimes. Spectacular Spider-Man. Finally, we come to OG Spidey himself. I think Spectacular Spider-Man is okay, but not an auto-include. He is a 3/2 for 2 with flash, which is decent, and you can pay 1 to give him flying. You can also pay 1 and sacrifice him to give creatures you control hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. I don't think your opponent is going to try a board wipe if you have Spidey out and 1 mana open, so I expect this protection ability to be used alongside flashing him in, making Spider-Man here a sort of heroic intervention, though you'll be spending more mana to protect fewer permanents. The upside, of course, is that he is a 3/2 that will probably be flying on most turns, so it's a protection spell that is also a good attacker. Almost like a modal card. I can see an aggro drafter taking him for his combat stats and a mid-range player taking him for his protection, and both decks potentially using the other mode that they didn't intend to use in a pinch. That said, I'm not super sold on him being a good choice for every cube, mostly because I think there's a lot of other good options out there. So those are the 10 cards I wanted to highlight from the Spider-Man Magic set, though I would love to hear what you're adding in the comments below because I've seen discussions about so many cards from this set, and it seems like there are a lot of cards in this set that fit in a lot of different cubes. It seems like they kind of nailed it, other than the fact that Spider-Man is on Magic cards. Mechanically, this set is kind of a slam dunk. Art-wise and theme-wise, a lot of people are understandably not super excited. Anyways, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next Masonzero MTG video.